Hollow Knight, Silksong. Not because of marketing promises or publisher pressure, but because of time. Years of silence, years of anticipation, years during which Silksong stopped being just a sequel and slowly transformed into a symbol of patience, obsession, and what players wanted modern indie games to represent. When Silksong finally released 6 to 7 months ago, it didn't simply arrive as a new game. It arrived as the end of a long emotional arc, and that alone shaped how it was received. Silksong was never going to be judged only on its mechanics, its art, or its level design. It was always going to be judged against an idea that had been growing larger with every passing year. From expansion to myth, it is worth remembering that Silksong was never meant to exist in this form, originally conceived as a DLC for Hollow Knight. The project gradually expanded until Team Cherry made the decision to turn it into a full standalone release. That transition alone reshaped expectations. This was no longer more Hollow Knight, it was supposed to be evolution. The original Hollow Knight earned its place not through spectacle, but through cohesion. World design, mechanics, tone, and narrative restraint worked together to create something deeply personal and melancholic. It was a game about decay, silence, and endurance. Silksong, by contrast, was always framed as something different, faster, brighter, more aggressive, and more expressive. That difference lies at the heart of Silksong's identity, and also at the center of the divided reactions it received. It is a different protagonist, a different philosophy, but Hornet is not the knight. This may sound obvious, but it represents a fundamental design shift. Where the knight felt like an empty vessel, a quiet observer moving through a dying world, Hornet is defined, agile, vocal, and assertive. Her movement is sharper, her combat more deliberate, and her presence constantly felt. Combat in Silksong is more proactive and demanding. Encounters feel closer to duels than survival tests, rewarding momentum and precision over caution. In many ways, Silksong leans further toward action than its predecessor ever did. For some players, this shift feels exhilarating. For others, it subtly undermines the meditative rhythm that defined Hollow Knight. Silksong does not invite you to move slowly through its world, it pushes you forward. That a world that breathes differently. Visually and structurally, Silksong is stunning. Fairloom is dense, vertical, and meticulously crafted. Each region carries a distinct identity, from its color palette to its mechanical language. The craftsmanship is undeniable. Yet Fairloom feels fundamentally different from Hallownest. Where Hallownest felt ancient, forgotten, and oppressive, Fairloom feels alive and active. It is a kingdom in motion rather than a corpse being explored. Exploration becomes less about loneliness and more about confrontation. This tonal shift replaces the quiet melancholy of Hollow Knight with a more theatrical and sometimes heroic atmosphere. Whether this is a strength or a loss depends entirely on what the player hoped Silksong would be. Systems, crafting, and momentum. Silksong introduces more systems than its predecessor. Tools, traps, resources, and crafting mechanics add layers to progression. On paper, this offers flexibility and customization. In practice, these systems occasionally feel at odds with the purity of the core experience. Where Hollow Knight thrived on restraint, Silksong embraces density. The result is ambition, but also occasional clutter. Still, when everything clicks, Silksong delivers some of the most satisfying combat sequences in the genre. Boss encounters stand out as some of the game's strongest moments. They are expressive, demanding, and often brilliant, reinforcing Silksong's emphasis on skill and aggression. Narrative presence versus narrative absence. One of Silksong's boldest choices is giving Hornet a clearer narrative presence. She speaks, reacts, and is known within the world. This creates stronger character-driven moments, but also narrows interpretation. Hollow Knight's story resonated because it was incomplete. Silksong offers more answers and clearer direction. It wants to be understood, not just felt. This makes the experience more accessible, but also less haunting. The weight of waiting. It is impossible to discuss Silksong without acknowledging the years of anticipation that preceded it. Expectations were not just high, they were unreal by default. Silksong had become an ideal long before it became a game. Judged on its own terms, however, Silksong is an extraordinary achievement. It is confident, distinct, and uncompromising in its vision. It does not try to replicate Hollow Knight. It tries to stand beside it. Conclusion. Hollow Knight Silksong is not Hollow Knight 2. It is faster, louder, more demanding, and more explicit. It trades some of the original's quiet magic for intensity and expression. For players seeking the same solitude and introspection as Hollow Knight, Silksong may feel unfamiliar. For those open to reinterpretation, it offers some of the finest combat and level design in modern indie gaming. 6 months after release, Silksong stands as a reminder that sequels do not always exist to preserve the past. Sometimes they exist to challenge it, and whether that challenge resonates or not says as much about the player as it does about the game.